Here's something that's going to piss you off. The butterflies in your stomach? That's not love. That chest-tightening obsession? Not love. That desperate need to check your phone every 30 seconds? Definitely not love. In fact, if you feel those things intensely, you're probably experiencing something closer to fear. And I'm going to show you exactly why your brain keeps confusing the two. Listen, I'm not here to feed you romantic fairy tales. I'm here to give you the truth, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Because here's your pain point. You keep choosing people who make you anxious, and you keep staying in relationships that feel like emotional roller coasters, and you keep thinking this chaos means you're finally experiencing real passion. But here's what's actually happening. Your brain has been programmed since childhood to associate love with anxiety. Disney movies, romance novels, your parents' dysfunctional relationship, they all taught you that love should hurt a little, that it should make you crazy. That obsession equals devotion. That's complete horseshit. Real love doesn't create constant anxiety. Real love doesn't make you feel like you're going to die if someone doesn't text back. That's not passion, that's panic. And the difference between the two will literally determine whether you spend your life in healthy, fulfilling relationships or toxic, miserable ones. Here's what you're going to learn today. The exact psychological mechanism that makes you confuse fear with love. Why your childhood programmed you to seek out anxiety. How to recognize the difference between genuine affection and neurotic attachment. And most importantly, how to stop choosing people who trigger your trauma and start choosing people who actually make you happy. This isn't theory. This is based on decades of working with people who made the exact same mistake you're making right now. So let's get into it. Your brain has the same chemical response to anxiety and early-stage attraction. Same stress hormones, same neurotransmitters, same physical sensations. So when you meet someone who makes you feel anxious because they're unavailable, unpredictable, or remind you of unresolved childhood issues, your brain labels that anxiety is love. When you're anxious about someone, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart races. Your stomach flips. You can't focus. Now, when you're attracted to someone, especially in the early stages, your body does the exact same thing. It releases the same stress hormones. You know what the difference is? Nothing. Chemically, they're identical. So your brain literally cannot tell if you're falling in love or having a panic attack. And here's the problem. You've been trained to interpret these sensations as romantic. You think, oh, butterflies mean I like them. No, butterflies mean you're stressed. Period. Let me tell you about a woman I worked with years ago. She came to me convinced she'd found her soulmate because she felt the most intense connection of her life. I asked her to describe what she felt around him. She said she felt nauseous. She couldn't sleep. She constantly worried he'd lose interest. Her entire day revolved around whether he'd texted her back. And she told me all of this with this dreamy look in her eyes, like these were proof of true love. I looked at her and said, that's not love. That's a stress response. Your body is screaming at you that something is wrong, and you're calling it romance. She got angry at me, told me I didn't understand. But 6 months later, she came back. The relationship had ended badly, just like I knew it would, and she finally understood what I'd been trying to tell her. She confused her body's panic signals with passion. You know what creates the strongest addiction? Unpredictable rewards. It's the same principle that makes gambling addictive. And it's the exact same thing happening in your relationships. When someone is inconsistent, they're amazing one day, cold the next, your brain goes into overdrive trying to figure out the pattern. This creates intense anxiety. But you interpret that intensity as I must really love this person because I think about them constantly. Wrong. You're just in a state of chronic uncertainty, and your brain hates uncertainty more than anything. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms there is. Casinos use it. Social media uses it. And emotionally unavailable people trigger it in you whether they mean to or not. Every time they pull away and then come back, your brain gets a hit of relief that feels amazing compared to the anxiety you were just experiencing. And you mistake that relief for love. It's not. It's just your nervous system finally calming down for a minute before the next round of stress begins. Here's something most people don't want to hear. You're attracted to what feels familiar, not what's good for you. If you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, your brain coded love as trying to get approval from someone who withholds it. So when you meet someone emotionally unavailable as an adult, you feel this intense pull. You think it's chemistry. It's not. It's your childhood wound recognizing itself. That's not love. That's trauma repetition. Think about it. If you grew up in a house where affection was conditional, where you had to perform to get attention, where love could be taken away at any moment, what did your brain learn? It learned that love feels unstable. It learned that you have to work for it. It learned that anxiety and love go together. So now, as an adult, when you meet someone who gives you stable, consistent affection, your brain goes, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like love, because it doesn't match the template you developed as a kid. But when you meet someone who's hot and cold, who makes you work for their attention, who keeps you guessing, your brain lights up and says, yes, this is it. This is what love feels like. Your brain is wrong. It's just recognizing a familiar pattern. But familiar doesn't mean healthy. It just means you've experienced it before. Real love develops gradually and feels calm. Anxiety-based attachment feels urgent and obsessive. If you can't stop thinking about someone, if you're constantly checking their social media, if your mood depends entirely on their attention, that's not love. That's anxious preoccupation. You're not in love with them. You're terrified of losing the validation they provide. Big difference. Here's how you can tell. In a healthy relationship, you think about the person regularly and happily. You look forward to seeing them. You enjoy your time together. But you can also focus on other things. You can work. You can spend time with friends. You have a life outside of them. In anxious attachment, you can't think about anything else. They consume your entire mental space. You're constantly analyzing every text message. You're constantly looking for signs they're pulling away. You're in a state of hypervigilance. That's not devotion. That's fear. Now let me show you where this confusion started. You weren't born confusing anxiety with love. You were taught, and the teaching started early. Your parents, your culture, your media consumption, they all fed you the same irrational belief. Real love should be difficult, dramatic, and a little bit painful. Most people grew up with conditional love. You got affection when you behaved a certain way. You lost it when you didn't. This taught you that love is something you have to earn, something that can be taken away at any moment. So as an adult, when someone gives you inconsistent attention, it feels normal. It feels like love. You think, I need to work harder to keep them interested. That's not romance. That's you replaying childhood dynamics where love was a reward for good behavior. I had a client once whose mother would give her the silent treatment whenever she did something wrong, sometimes for days. And when her mother finally spoke to her again, my client felt this overwhelming relief and gratitude. She learned that love returns after you've suffered enough. So guess what kind of relationships she chose as an adult? Partners who withdrew when they were upset. Partners who punished her with silence. And she stayed with them because the pattern felt like home. Every movie you watched growing up showed you the same story. The couple fights, breaks up, has dramatic reconciliations. The message? If it's not tumultuous, it's not real love. Calm, stable relationships got labeled boring. So you internalized this belief. If I'm not crying or fighting or feeling intense emotions, the spark is gone. That's complete nonsense. But you believe it, and it's destroying your ability to recognize healthy love when it shows up. Think about every romantic comedy you've ever seen. The couple meets. There's some obstacle. They can't be together. They fight. They break up. And then, in the last 10 minutes, someone runs through an airport or interrupts a wedding or makes some grand gesture, and they get back together. The end. You never see what happens after. You never see the part where they have to actually build a life together. You just see the drama and the intensity and the big emotional moments. And your brain goes, that's what love looks like. No, that's what entertainment looks like. Real love is what happens after the credits roll. It's the boring stuff, the grocery shopping together, the quiet evenings, the consistent showing up. But you've been trained to think that's not romantic enough. If you grew up feeling like you weren't enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, not worthy enough, You developed what I call scarcity thinking around love. You believe deep down that love is rare, that you have to cling to it when you find it, even if it makes you miserable. So when someone shows you attention, your brain screams, "Don't let this go. You might never find this again." That fear creates intense anxiety, and you mistake that anxiety for proof that this person is special. I see this constantly. People staying in terrible relationships because they're afraid they won't find anyone else. They think, well, at least I have someone. At least I'm not alone. And they tolerate behavior they would never accept from anyone else. All because they've convinced themselves that love is scarce, and they should be grateful for whatever scraps they can get. That's an irrational belief. There are billions of people on this planet. Love is not scarce. What's scarce is your willingness to be alone long enough to find someone who actually treats you well. Here's an irrational belief that ruins millions of relationships. The right person will complete me. They'll fix my anxiety, my insecurity, my unhappiness. So you meet someone, and in the beginning, you feel this temporary relief from your chronic anxiety. You think this is it. This person is the answer. But they're not. They're just a distraction. And when the initial high wears off and your underlying anxiety returns, you panic. You think the relationship is failing. It's not. You're just facing the same problems you've always had, except now you're blaming another person for not solving them. No one can complete you because you're not incomplete. You're a whole person who happens to have problems. We all do. And those problems don't disappear because you're in a relationship. If you were anxious and insecure when you were single, you'll be anxious and insecure in a relationship unless you do the work to change that. Another person can support you in that work, but they can't do it for you. All right, so you've been programmed to seek anxiety. But here's the question you're probably asking. How do I actually tell the difference between real love and this anxious attachment garbage? Let me break it down for you. Real love feels secure, not desperate. It enhances your life, not consumes it. It brings out your best self, not your most neurotic self. Anxious attachment does the opposite of all these things. And once you understand the markers, you'll never confuse the two again. Real love makes you feel safe. Not bored, safe. There's a difference. With real love, you don't wake up every day wondering if they still like you. You're not constantly testing them or seeking reassurance. You trust that they're committed, and that trust allows you to relax and actually enjoy the relationship. Anxious attachment, you're in constant fear. Every unanswered text is proof they're losing interest. Every small conflict feels like the end. You're always on edge, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's not love. That's hypervigilance masquerading as devotion. I want you to think about how you feel in your current relationship or your last relationship. Do you feel relaxed around this person? Can you be quiet together without it being awkward? Can you disagree without feeling like the whole relationship is in jeopardy? Or are you constantly managing your anxiety, constantly trying to say the right thing, act the right way, be interesting enough to keep their attention? If it's the second one, that's not love. That's performance anxiety. Here's an easy way to tell. Does this relationship make you more yourself or less yourself? Real love encourages your growth. It makes you want to pursue your goals, spend time with friends, maintain your hobbies. You feel expanded, not diminished. Anxious attachment shrinks you. Your entire identity becomes wrapped up in this other person. You abandon your interests. You isolate from friends. Your mood is entirely dependent on their attention. You've essentially given them complete control over your emotional state. That's not intimacy. That's codependency. I worked with a guy once who gave up everything for a woman he was dating. He stopped playing basketball with his friends because she didn't like how much time it took. He quit a band he'd been in for 5 years because she thought musicians were immature. He stopped talking to a female friend from college because his girlfriend was jealous. And he told me all of this like it was proof of how much he loved her. Like sacrifice equals love. I said to him, "You're not in love. You're terrified. You're so afraid of losing her that you're willing to erase yourself to keep her around. That's not healthy. That's not sustainable. And it's not love." 6 months later, she left him anyway. And he was devastated, not just because the relationship ended, but because he looked around and realized he had nothing left. No hobbies, no friends, no identity outside of being her boyfriend. He'd given everything away for someone who didn't even ask him to. Real love brings peace. Not constant excitement, not dramatic highs and lows, peace. You feel calm around this person. You feel like yourself. There's passion, sure, but it's grounded in mutual respect and genuine affection. Anxious attachment brings chaos. You're on an emotional roller coaster. One day you're euphoric because they paid attention to you. The next day you're devastated because they seem distant. Your nervous system is constantly activated. You feel like you're in a state of emergency. And you've convinced yourself this turmoil means the relationship is passionate. It's not. It's just stressful. Here's the thing about peace. It feels boring at first if you're not used to it. If you grew up in chaos, if all your past relationships were dramatic, peace feels wrong. It feels like something's missing. Your brain says, where's the intensity? Where's the drama? This must not be real love because I'm not suffering. That's your conditioning talking. That's your trauma brain seeking familiar patterns. Peace is what love is supposed to feel like. The fact that it feels wrong to you just means you need to recalibrate your nervous system. In real love, both people invest equally. There's mutual effort, mutual vulnerability, mutual care. The relationship feels balanced. In anxious attachment, you're doing most of the work. You're the one always initiating, always trying to keep their interest, always bending yourself into knots to make them happy. And they're just existing, showing up occasionally, giving you just enough attention to keep you hooked. That power imbalance creates anxiety because you're constantly afraid of losing something you never fully had in the first place. Pay attention to who's doing the pursuing in your relationship. Are you always the one texting first, making plans, checking in, apologizing, trying to fix things? If the answer is yes, you're in an unbalanced dynamic. And that imbalance is creating your anxiety. You're working so hard because on some level you know this person isn't as invested as you are. And instead of accepting that and walking away, you're trying to convince them to care more. That's exhausting, and it doesn't work. With real love, you can imagine a realistic future together. You talk about plans. You make decisions together. There's consistency and follow-through. With anxious attachment, the future is always vague. They avoid commitment. They keep you in limbo. You're always wondering where you stand. This uncertainty creates massive anxiety, and your brain interprets that anxiety as I must really want this person because I think about our future constantly. No, you're anxious because there is no secure future, and your brain knows it. Think about it like this. Real love is like being hungry. Your body sends you a clear signal. I need food. You eat. The signal stops. Simple. Anxious attachment is like being nauseous. You feel sick. Sometimes people eat when they're nauseous thinking it'll help. It doesn't. It usually makes it worse. But they keep trying because the discomfort is unbearable and they don't know what else to do. That's what you're doing in these relationships. You're feeding your nausea and calling it hunger. You're responding to discomfort by seeking more of what's making you uncomfortable. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, I get it. I've been confusing anxiety with love. But what do I do about it? How do I stop this pattern? That's what we're covering next. Breaking this pattern requires you to challenge your irrational beliefs about love and consciously retrain your nervous system to recognize safety instead of chaos. It's not easy. Your brain will fight you, but it's absolutely possible. Start by writing down what you believe love should feel like. Be honest. Most people will write things like, love should make me feel alive. I should think about them constantly. I should feel jealous sometimes. It means I care. The right person will make me feel complete. These are all irrational beliefs. They're lies you've been told. Real love doesn't make you feel alive through stress. It makes you feel alive through joy. You shouldn't think about someone constantly. That's obsession. Jealousy isn't love, it's insecurity. And no person can complete you because you're not incomplete. Once you identify these beliefs, you can start challenging them. Ask yourself, where's the evidence for this? Who told me this was true? Has believing this made my relationships better or worse? Most of the time, you'll realize you're operating on beliefs you absorbed from movies, from your parents, from romance novels, not from actual evidence or experience. Here's what I want you to do right now. Take out a piece of paper. Write down every belief you have about what love should feel like. Then next to each one, write down where you learned it. Did your parents model this? Did you see it in a movie? Did a friend tell you this? And then ask yourself, has this belief ever led to a healthy relationship? Be honest. If the answer is no, it's time to let it go. You need to stop romanticizing your anxiety. Stop telling yourself that your anxiety means the relationship is important. It doesn't. Anxiety is just anxiety. It's your nervous system responding to perceived threat. That's it. When you feel butterflies, don't think, this must be the one. Think my body is stressed. Why? When you can't stop thinking about someone, don't think this is real passion. Think I'm obsessing. What am I afraid of? Reframe every anxious symptom as exactly what it is, a symptom, not proof of love. This is hard because you've been doing the opposite for years, maybe decades. You've been using your anxiety as evidence that you care. But anxiety is just fear wearing different clothes. When you're anxious about someone, ask yourself what you're afraid of. Usually, it's one of these things. I'm afraid they'll leave me. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid I'll end up alone. Those are valid fears, but they're not love. They're insecurity. And you need to address the insecurity, not feed it by staying in relationships that trigger it. This is the hardest part because it goes against every instinct you have. You need to consciously choose people who make you feel calm. And your brain will tell you they're boring. It will tell you there's no spark. That's your trauma talking. That's your conditioning. Ignore it. Calm doesn't mean boring. Calm means secure. It means you can actually be yourself instead of constantly performing or managing your anxiety. It means you can build something real instead of just reacting to drama. Force yourself to give calm people a real chance. Go on multiple dates. Let the relationship develop slowly. Your brain will adjust. I promise you. What feels boring now will start to feel comfortable. What feels like no chemistry now will start to feel like genuine compatibility. But you have to stick with it long enough for your nervous system to recalibrate. I had a client who kept dating these intense, passionate guys who treated her terribly. She'd come to me crying about the latest drama. I kept telling her, you need to date someone stable, someone kind, someone boring. She finally met a guy who was exactly that. Nice job, good to his family, called when he said he would. And she was completely uninterested. She said there was no spark. I told her, the spark you're looking for is anxiety. This guy doesn't make you anxious because he's consistent and kind. Give him a chance. Go on 6 dates before you decide. She reluctantly agreed. And you know what happened? By date 4, she started to relax. By date 6, she was enjoying herself. A year later, she told me it was the healthiest relationship she'd ever had. But she almost didn't give it a chance because it didn't feel dramatic enough. Here's the real work. You need to stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people. As long as you need someone else's attention to feel valuable, you will always be anxious in relationships. You'll always be scanning for signs they're losing interest because your entire sense of self depends on their approval. This is why therapy, self-reflection, and building a life you actually like matter so much. You need hobbies. You need friendships. You need goals that have nothing to do with romance. When you have a solid sense of self, other people become additions to your life, not the foundation of it. Think about it like building a house. If you build your happiness on another person, you're building on sand. The second they leave, the whole thing collapses. But if you build your happiness on self-acceptance and a meaningful life, you're building on rock. Other people can enhance what you've built, but they can't destroy it. So what does this look like practically? It means you need a life outside of your relationship. You need things that bring you joy that have nothing to do with your partner. You need friends you see regularly. You need work or projects that give you a sense of purpose. You need to be able to spend a Friday night alone without falling apart. If you can't do these things, you're not ready for a healthy relationship. You're just looking for someone to fill the void, and that never works. When you're used to chaos, peace feels uncomfortable. Your brain will create problems just to return to familiar territory. So you need to build your tolerance for calm. This means when you're dating someone healthy and you feel that urge to create drama, to pick a fight, to test them, To pull away, you recognize it for what it is. Your nervous system trying to return to homeostasis. You sit with the discomfort. You don't act on it. You remind yourself, this feels wrong because it's unfamiliar. That doesn't mean it is wrong. Over time, your baseline will shift. Calm will start to feel normal. This is like someone who grew up eating extremely spicy food. When they eat mild food, it tastes bland to them, even though it's perfectly seasoned. Their taste buds have been conditioned. The same thing happens with relationships. If you're used to high-intensity drama, healthy relationships will feel flavorless at first. You have to recalibrate. You have to give your nervous system time to adjust to a new baseline. And here's the thing. Your brain will sabotage you during this process. You'll start dating someone healthy, and your brain will say, "See? I told you it's boring. Leave." You have to override that voice. You have to remind yourself that boring is just unfamiliar. That comfort isn't the same as complacency. That peace is what you've been searching for all along. You just didn't recognize it. All right, we've covered a lot, but I want to make sure you understand something crucial. This isn't just about fixing your love life. This is about fixing how you think about yourself. The reason you confuse anxiety with love is because you don't believe you deserve calm, secure love. Deep down, you think you need to earn it, prove you're worthy of it, fight for it. This is the core irrational belief that's driving everything. And until you accept yourself unconditionally, you'll keep seeking out relationships that confirm your worst fears about yourself. Most people operate on conditional self-acceptance. I'm worthy if I'm successful. I'm lovable if I'm attractive. I'm valuable if someone wants me. This is the root of all your relationship anxiety. Because if your worth depends on someone else's opinion, you'll always be anxious about losing that opinion. You need to develop what I call unconditional self-acceptance. You're worthy because you exist. Period. Not because of what you achieve, not because of who loves you. You're a fallible human being with strengths and weaknesses, and that's okay. When you truly accept this, other people's opinions stop having so much power over you. If someone doesn't want to be with you, it doesn't mean you're defective. It just means you're not compatible. That's it. No drama. No existential crisis. Just information. You're okay either way. When you're anxious in a relationship, you're constantly trying to prove you're worth loving. You're performing. You're people-pleasing. You're monitoring their reactions to everything you do. This is exhausting. And it's not love, it's a job interview that never ends. Real relationships don't require you to constantly prove yourself. You show up as you are. They either like it or they don't. And if they don't, that doesn't mean you're defective. It just means you're not compatible. I want you to think about how much energy you spend trying to be what you think other people want. How often do you hold back your real opinion because you're afraid they'll judge you? How often do you agree to things you don't want to do because you're afraid they'll lose interest? Every single one of those moments is you choosing their approval over your authenticity. And every time you do that, you're reinforcing the belief that the real you isn't good enough. Stop doing it. Start being yourself. And yeah, some people won't like it. Good. Those aren't your people. The people who are right for you will appreciate your authenticity. But you'll never find them if you're too busy pretending to be someone else. Your need for approval is what makes you vulnerable to anxious attachment. When someone withholds approval, you become desperate to get it back. This desperation feels intense. You interpret it as love, but it's just your addiction to validation being triggered. You need to break this addiction. Start by noticing every time you modify your behavior to get approval. Every time you don't share your real opinion because you're afraid they'll judge you. Every time you agree to something you don't want to do because you're afraid they'll lose interest. Each of these moments is you choosing their approval over your authenticity. Stop doing it. Here's an irrational belief that creates massive anxiety. If someone rejects me, it means something is wrong with me. No, it means you're not compatible. That's it. Rejection is information, not evaluation. When you can accept that not everyone will like you, and that's perfectly fine, you stop being so terrified of it. And when you're not terrified of rejection, you stop clinging to relationships that aren't good for you just because you're afraid you won't find anything else. Think about it this way. If you go to a restaurant and you order something and you don't like it, does that mean the food is objectively bad? No, it means it's not to your taste. Other people might love it. It's just not for you. Same thing with relationships. If someone doesn't want to be with you, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you're not to their taste. And that's fine. You're not trying to be universally appealing. You're trying to find the people who appreciate who you actually are. But you can't do that if you're terrified of being disliked. You'll just keep molding yourself into whatever you think people want, and you'll never find genuine connection because you're not being genuine. Imagine someone who's terrified of being alone with their own thoughts, so they fill every moment with noise, distraction, relationships. They never develop a relationship with themselves. When they finally sit in silence, they panic. This is what happens when you avoid self-acceptance. You need other people to drown out your own negative self-talk. You need their validation to cover up the fact that you don't validate yourself. The solution isn't finding someone who validates you more. The solution is learning to validate yourself, learning to sit with yourself, learning to actually like who you are, flaws and all. Once you do that, other people's opinions become less urgent. They're nice, but they're not necessary for your survival. So here's where we are. You now understand the mechanism. You know where it comes from. You know what real love looks like. You know how to break the pattern. Now let me tie this all together and give you something you can actually use starting today. If you're in a relationship right now, ask yourself these questions. Do I feel more anxious or more peaceful around this person? Am I more myself or less myself with them? Does this relationship energize me or drain me? Do I trust them, or am I constantly looking for proof they still care? Be brutally honest. If the answers reveal anxious attachment, you have a decision to make. Either address it directly with your partner and work on building security together, or admit this relationship is feeding your worst patterns and walk away. I know that's hard. I know you're thinking, but I love them. Do you? Or are you just addicted to the anxiety they create? Real love feels different. It feels calmer. It feels safer. If your relationship feels like a constant emergency, that's not love. That's addiction. If you're single, you need a new filter for who you date. Old filter. Do they excite me? Do I feel intense chemistry? Am I thinking about them constantly? New filter. Do I feel safe around them? Can I be myself? Do they communicate clearly? Do they follow through on what they say? The second filter sounds less romantic. That's your conditioning talking. The second filter is what leads to actual happiness. Start using it. Next time you meet someone and you feel those butterflies, pause. Ask yourself, is this attraction or is this anxiety? Are they making me feel good or are they making me feel uncertain? Uncertainty creates intensity, but it doesn't create healthy relationships. Every time you feel anxious about a relationship, write down what you're feeling and what you're telling yourself. Then challenge it. I'm anxious because they haven't texted back in 2 hours. I'm telling myself this means they're losing interest. Is there evidence for this? No. They could be busy. They've texted back late before and nothing was wrong. My anxiety is just my fear of rejection, not reality. Do this every single time. You're retraining your brain to distinguish between real problems and imagined ones. This is cognitive restructuring. You're taking your automatic thoughts and examining them. Most of the time, you'll realize your thoughts are based on fear, not facts. And once you see that, the anxiety loses its power. Stop looking for someone to complete you. Build a life you actually like before you try to add someone to it. Develop friendships. Pursue meaningful work. Create hobbies that bring you joy. When your life is already full, relationships become optional instead of desperate. And when they're optional, you can choose them consciously instead of clinging to them out of fear. If your entire life revolves around finding a relationship, you're setting yourself up for anxious attachment. Because when you finally get into a relationship, you'll be so terrified of losing it that you'll tolerate anything. You'll sacrifice yourself. You'll ignore red flags. You'll stay away longer than you should. All because you have nothing else. Build something else. Build a life that's satisfying on its own. Then add a relationship to it. Don't make a relationship the foundation. Make it the addition. Here's what you need to understand. You're not broken for confusing anxiety with love. You were trained to do it. Your childhood, your culture, your past relationships, they all taught you that love should hurt a little. That should make you crazy. That if you're not suffering, you're not really in love. That's complete garbage. And now you know better. Real love doesn't create constant anxiety. Real love doesn't make you obsess. Real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself to keep someone else interested. Real love is calm, secure, and mutual. It brings out the best in you, not the most neurotic version of you. So here's your challenge. Stop romanticizing your anxiety. Stop telling yourself that intense feelings equal deep love. Stop choosing people who make you feel like you're in danger. Your nervous system isn't a compass pointing you toward true love. It's a broken alarm system responding to familiar patterns. You deserve relationships that make you feel safe. You deserve partners who show up consistently. You deserve love that enhances your life instead of consuming it. But you're not going to get it until you stop seeking out the chaos and start building self-acceptance. Until you stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people. Until you challenge every irrational belief you have about what love is supposed to feel like. This isn't easy work. Your brain will fight you every step of the way. It will tell you that calm people are boring, that healthy relationships lack passion, that you're settling if you're not suffering. Ignore it. That's your trauma talking. That's your conditioning. That's the scared little kid inside you who learned that love is something you have to earn and can lose at any moment. You're not that kid anymore. You get to choose differently now. And if you want to understand why you keep attracting the same type of person over and over again, even when you swear you're done with that pattern, I break down the psychological mechanism in my next video. It's called Why You're Addicted to People Who Don't Want You. And it's going to show you the exact reason your brain keeps leading you back to the same unavailable, emotionally distant people, even when you consciously know better. Click it. Watch it. Stop repeating the same mistakes.